right, I think we can start. Thanks everyone for joining for the first Lunch and Learn from the Oath team on customizable roles. And my topic will be the first one. I will talk about the initial discovery, the motivation behind the introducing the feature, and the technical discovery we did. So as everyone knows, the built-in roles we have in GitLab isn't very flexible. I think the first feature we implemented to make it more flexible was to allow developers to create projects. I think that was added 5 years ago. But we soon realized via bug reports that there's a few issues related to that. One is that there are a couple of dependent permissions, for example, to project creation. So one of the bug was that once someone as a developer created a new project and tried to push a README via the auto-generated README, the default README, but it failed because there was a dependent permission. And it was also just made basically the project creation authorization check more complex. And if we wanted to introduce more and more flexibility into permissions that way, that isn't really manageable. It would the complexity of the code would soon go out of hand. So that was basically the motivation to figure out how can we create or make it more flexible. We soon received more and more issues and feature requests to make other permissions more flexible. But we decided to postpone solution. And so the more generic solution, we started with the technical discovery. The technical discovery basically had two goals. The first is we have in the documentation a static permission table, and the problem with the static permission table is that there's no one-to-one relation to the permissions in the code base. So the permissions in the code base are more dynamic. Some of them relies on licensing checks. Some of them relies on feature checks. The documentation is more how we expect certain permissions to work. But as I mentioned, there's no one-to-one permission. As features are developed, we try to keep it up to date. And we always, so for example, when a feature flag is rolled out, then we also update the related permission, if there's any. But since there's a gap between the two, there's obviously documentation issues sometimes. These documentation issues can happen that the documentation has different permission or different access level than the code has. Or we also had bug reports when, for example, a certain permission was checked in the API, but it required a different access level on the UI. So there's that. And we wanted to have the code base basically a single source of truth. But as I mentioned, it's not easy. We figured out we can evaluate the permissions for a certain instance setting. So we set some certain feature flags or add a licensing, and then we can evaluate. But still, there's more permissions in the code base. We need to map how each of them relates to the permission table. And there's still ongoing discovery on this. We are also thinking about consolidating permissions because there's a high level of redundancy there, and probably most of them can be simplified. And the second part of the technical discovery, how are we going to actually introduce a more generic solution to make the roles more customizable? And we came up with a technical discovery, an initial plan, how we are going to do that, basically introducing a new customizable role in the code base, and the team faced many permission check related performance issues. One of the main concern was how if there will be like any degradation regarding the performance. So we wanted to like first introduce this technical discovery behind the feature flag, and ask for the help of the scalability team to make sure that there's no performance degradation introduced. The scalability team helped us with coming up with a plan, and so we made an implementation, and we also evaluated the storage of permissions. So one gem in particular was the flagship gem, which introduces, and we evaluated whether integrating with this gem would be better for storing the permissions. We asked for the help of the database team, because this is eventually a database question that needs to be answered. Basically, even though we gain a lot so it requires less storage to like store the permission via bit fields than via just Boolean fields. The gem is not well maintained, and now we have standards to introduce external dependencies for the gem. So the conclusion of the database team was that it's better to spend our time on making sure that the performance is better than thinking about storage. So that was the two parts of the technical discovery. And I will hand over to Jesse to talk about the MVC on read code.
Great. Thank you. And Elmira, your connection was sometimes spotty there, so I don't know if you can rejig or something before the next section. But mostly we could hear everything, but there was some little. Great. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the customer MVC. Who here, you can do this in the chat or just like raise your hand. Who here has used the customer MVC, played around with it? I see some hands. Who has not yet? Out yourselves. Not yet. Great. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this MVC. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of like what the challenges were. And this is really like, in terms of the map of this feature, it's like you are here, right? So the customer MVC was announced as part of 15.9. We were super excited to roll it out to everybody. And we are in 15.10 now. So that was just a few weeks ago. In the note stock here, I just did a little table to kind of show you, based on the technical discovery that Imra did before I was even on this team, like kind of how we architected it, just like at the database level. Because there is like another path we could have gone down, right? Where we were like, let's build a whole new permission system. I actually, when I first joined, did some investigation into Zanzibar, which is this white paper that Google put out about kind of a very performant permission system, and other companies, I think Airbnb was one of them, built this whole new permission system. Permissions are a problem for every software company, and they're always challenging from a performance perspective. So anyways, our MVC, our iterative approach was to build it on top of our existing infrastructure in our existing monorepo. So we already have namespaces, right, in the GitLab code base. Namespace can be a project or a group, and then member records are associated with those namespaces. So there's a members table. A member has a namespace ID on it, so you know which namespace it is associated with. We introduced a new table called member role. This will come up again in Imra's section on challenges or like things we're thinking about, but in the database representation of custom roles, they are called member roles because I hope I get this explanation right. I guess the idea is that right now we are thinking of these as custom roles, but there is a potential future where they're just role, like this is how we do roles. We don't have this idea of a static role anymore. And so these custom roles might become just regular roles. So member role was like a more generic name for that. And then so a member role is created on a root namespace, so a group. And it also has a base access level, which those of you who don't work with auth stuff every day might not know how access levels work. I actually put this in the glossary at the top, access level. This is something that took me a little while to understand. So access levels are integer values and they map to our current static permissions. So I think guest is 10, is that right? They go up the more permissions you have, and like owner's 40. And we use these everywhere. Like it's kind of this funny dual world, right? Where we talk about owners and developers and reporters, and in the code, like those terms don't show up very much. It's all like access level integers that are saved as constants. So anyways, with member role, the reason there's a base access level is that we say, okay, if you have this custom role, this member role, you can do everything that somebody of that role, of that static role can do, plus a few more things. And currently those few more things are actually one thing, which is read code. So our very exciting MVC, and Hannah, I give you a lot of credit for this because you went to the iteration office hours and had a conversation about, what can we do to kind of release something of value to our customers. And I think the conclusion, I don't know if the conclusion came from the iteration office hours or it was before that, but it was like, hey, we've heard a lot of feedback from our customers that guests should be able to read code. Like they would like to have a guest user that can just read code, because normally a guest user on a private repository with our static roles doesn't see anything. Like you get to the project and it's just like, hey, this is a project that exists, and you really don't have any information aside from that as a guest. So we added this Boolean attribute called read code. And so if you are one of the many people who raised your hands and said you tried this MVC, what you've seen is that a guest with this custom role can go in and actually read code in a project. So it's exciting. So
Betsy,
anyways.
sorry, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if one of the considerations in making the member role as part of the namespace had to do with one of the challenges of doing development for GitLab is that you have to take SaaS and self-managed into consideration. So was that a consideration when doing the MVC, that we don't have this at the instance level because then it wouldn't be available to SaaS?
Oh, that namespaces. Well, I might not be understanding the question, but is the question that did we build this to associate custom roles with a namespace because that only works for SaaS, or because it would work for both?
No, because it would work for both.
Imre might have a better answer to that question.
So yeah, I think there's an ongoing initiative by the organization group, or now the pods group, to handle, or basically make the experience between self-managed and .com more consistent. So there's a misalignment because we have instance level on self-hosted, and which doesn't exist on .com. And I think it is, we want to introduce an organization, a new level, which is basically going to be a root group and consolidate basically this instance level group level mismatch, but I'm not up to date with the details of this initiative.
I'm no longer super up to date about this, but yeah, the general direction is to avoid adding a lot of instance level features right now, and to focus on SaaS first, and if introducing something new, do it in a way that's SaaS friendly, I would say.
Okay, yeah, because we do have validations that these custom roles must belong to the root group. So in self-managed, is there a root group? or they can have many root groups in a self-managed instance.
They can have many root groups, yeah.
Okay.
So they can still use it.
Okay.
They are not able to add, for example, custom roles that would be spanning between all the groups.
Okay. Yeah, and then just from like a database design perspective, just so the custom role, the member role, it has to belong to a root group, but you can associate it with any of the member records in the hierarchy. So even if I'm a member of a project, I can still have that membership be a custom role using the custom role of the root group of that project. Learned a lot about root groups in this interesting world. So anyways, when I showed up on the scene here, Imra and Hannah and others had done a lot of pre-work so that really implementing this MVC was like pretty simple. It was like, okay, like this is what I have to do. Got it, did it, had the code ready, pushed up my code. And then it was like spec failure, spec failure, spec failure, spec failure. All the specs started failing because we have these N+1 specs in many parts of our code base. And by introducing custom roles, we created a massive N+1 issue. I don't know who here has dealt with our access level, our project authorizations preloaders. Anyone? Yes. So we already have preloaders everywhere. The way that we do permissions checks now are we have these preloaders, they kind of find all of your memberships, which there are many kinds. There are direct memberships, there are inherited memberships, there are shared memberships, there are implicit memberships of the parent group of project. So they find all of those for a user or a group of users and a project or a group of projects, and they preload all of those. I believe it's saved in Redis. Is that right? Is that the caching mechanism? Not sure.
It's in the database, I think.
In Postgres database?
Yeah, the project authorization table is there, yeah.
Oh, okay. But I think that it may also do something in Redis. Not sure. I have to loop back on that. But yes, project authorizations are pre-saved in the database to calculate, like, basically what can this user, what role do they have on this project? Because they might be associated with the project in like 5 ways. And so you have to say, well, what is their max role? And we use their max role. Suddenly with custom roles, we've really thrown a wrench into that whole system because we're like, and in addition to, having an access level, you might be able to do one more thing. And one day, many more things. And so that super easy MR sat in a pending state for many weeks while I worked with people from the database team and others to figure out how to write a preloader for custom roles, which we did. And all of those N+1 specs eventually passed, which was great. And then there was the final step, which was kind of testing the rollout on production. So Imra kind of alluded to this earlier, but the big question mark with all of this, so even after we have it working, I have it working locally, I'm really excited, I get the N+1 specs all passing, we don't necessarily have 100% test coverage on N+1s, and we don't necessarily know how performant this preloader is going to be. So figuring out how to roll that out was really challenging. The way we did that, and we plan to write something more up about this, because one lesson that I learned was that we don't have a ton of prior art other than slowly roll out a feature flag for how to kind of evaluate the performance of a new feature. I think the general guidance is put it behind a feature flag, roll it out slowly, like make sure that things aren't breaking. But permissions, as all of you know who worked on anything related to permissions, are everywhere. We do permissions checks everywhere. We do many of them. And so even a moderate performance problem with permissions could cause a really large problem with GitLab as a whole. This was a super clever approach, I thought. Imran should get a lot of credit for it. So we put all of this behind a feature flag, but then we also created a user-based feature flag. And so to create an A/B test scenario, globally, we rolled out the user feature flag to 50% of users. And then we slowly rolled out the custom roles feature flag to groups, and we made sure we kind of evaluated, okay, users with and without the feature flag, what are the request times to these endpoints that are using the custom roles? And luckily, I was very shocked by this. We didn't have to do any more performance tuning once we started looking at the than times. Basically, the preloader was doing its job and we were using it appropriately everywhere. And that was really exciting. So yeah, and we use Kibana dashboards to do those. And again, we're going to write up more about that later because it was an interesting learning experience. And I think that's all for the MVC. Back to Imran.
Yeah, thanks. So the next topic is the limitation and challenges. We have a couple of items here. So the first one is group sharing. If anyone worked on a bug related to group sharing or mostly performance issues, they already know how tricky they can be. If I remember correctly, the organization team had a giant epic listing all the questions related to group sharing, all the bugs related to group sharing. Yes. So there's actually a lot of edge cases which need to be considered, and not just from engineering perspective, from product perspective as well. So for example, one of the questions, whether in a project, if invited to private group, they should see each other. There's like a lot of pros and cons for each. But it's a really tricky issue. And so we haven't implemented group sharing for customizable roles. And it's also a tricky issue because as we mentioned already, the custom roles can be created on the root group level. So it's scoped to a single group hierarchy on our organization. But groups can be shared across group hierarchies. So we still need to figure out how this sharing is going to work, because for a share, the user can set the maximum access level, which ideally can be also a custom role. But what happens if these custom roles doesn't match, or there's like conflict between the two? So that's one of the questions we need to resolve. And the second one I already mentioned, as always comes up with group sharing, is performance, because it complicates querying a lot. And we might probably need to do the same performance testing we did with the previous rollout, just to make sure that there's no performance degradation. During the technical MVC, we also investigated a few backup plans in case we need to do something else. Basically, the biggest help from performance-wise can come from the group project consolidation, which organization team was working on also. So now the POTS team, I think. And because authorization checks can be very complex, as we mentioned, we need to like check sharing, we need to check inheritance, we need to check direct membership, and a lot of things. If we consolidate groups and projects, we can eliminate many parts of this complex query and make it much simpler. So we basically wanted to like figure out if we need to tackle group project consolidation first before we can introduce custom roles. But so far it seems custom roles can go ahead. And next topic is naming. Jesse already mentioned. There's a bit of a mismatch. I try to not review member role in the code base. We call it customizable role. One thing we need to consider when thinking about naming is, as I mentioned, we have these two systems. We have the static built-in roles, and we have the customizable roles, and they live next to each other. And ideally, from architecture standpoint, there should be a single system. So in the future, we might refactor the existing static roles as a fixed roles in the database that cannot be changed. And if we do that, we can have a single system. So if we consider that, the member role name might make more sense than customizable role. but this would mean a huge refactor. So we haven't decided and committed on the approach yet. But these are the things we consider. And then during the technical discovery, we were also thinking about creating roles where permission can be denied or allowed, but we soon realized that allowing only additive custom roles would make the architecture much simpler and the implementation. Because there's a lot of edge cases around how we calculate the effective permission in a project or a group for a single member. So if we also allow preventive, even more complex. And the effective static role for a user, since the access flows down, we just take the maximum of all available memberships a user can have, whatever type. And this rhymes better with additive roles. When we just need to figure out if there's any custom role that allows the permission, then we allow it. So it's much more aligned with the existing static roles. And yeah, reasoning and debugging is also much simpler with additive only roles. And we also soon realized that oh, sorry, one more thing regarding the additive only custom roles. So we don't lose any of the capability we had previously, because if a permission should be prevented for a custom role, a user can create the same custom role with a lower base access level and just enable all of the permissions except for the one. So we can still have the same functionality via additive roles. And custom roles cannot be edited once used. So the reasoning behind that is, as I already mentioned, the inheritance model and permission calculation and access levels are very complicated. And if you imagine the scenario when there's 1,000 members group hierarchy, it's really, really hard to understand if changing a custom role, what are the far-reaching implications of that edit, because the custom roles can be used on any level, and they also conflict with other sources of memberships. It's really, really hard to foresee the implication of an edit, so we decided to not allow it. If we go ahead and require the admin to create a new custom role and then assign all of the users to that new role, that's much more of an explicit action than just changing the existing or the already assigned custom role. And the last one is validating the access level of the membership and the base access level of the custom role. So this is important. As we mentioned, there's these two systems next to each other, the static built-in roles and the customizable roles. And we need to make sure that those works in harmony until we have these two systems. And so we enforce this validation that the two level need to be the same. So if there would be a difference between the two, it would be really hard to. We need to make sure or figure out which has priority over the other. It will also complicate how users reason about the effective permission or the effective access level when considering this. So we decided that until we have these two systems, the base access level and the access level must match for the two. And that's the part on limitation and challenges. And I'm handing back to Jesse.
Thank you. Okay, final section. So The future of
we,
customer. Oh,
yes, before we move forward,
Yeah.
I have a question for Imre about the additive roles. It's gonna be possible to add a role that is not one level up, but so imagine that. So now we have created a guest user that has read code, but could it be another permission that is associated with, let's say, an administrator? Would that be allowed in the future?
Yes, there's actually an ongoing discussion just from yesterday. So you might get like different answers, but I think yes. So I think the idea was that we can add like any permission to a custom role. So even if the base access level for the custom role is, for example, reporter, then you can basically like add every single permission an admin has except for one. If you wish, but Jesse might have some thoughts on that.
I'm just linking to the live discussion in an issue because it is a live issue, and I think the answer, Eduardo, is going to be yes. I think you're going to be able to add to group, give a guest a permission that usually just an owner has. I think the challenge is going to be primarily a UX challenge. So I think the scenario that I was thinking of is, say you want to give a guest, you want to create one really special guest, and all that guest can do is like delete your entire organization. Like it's kind of like the super user that can do nothing but this one really important thing. We can make that technically that's going to be possible. Can that guest user even get to the menu that has the delete button? That, because there are going to be maybe dozens of other permissions checks to get to that point. So we have to logically group permissions, or like basically we want to make sure that we're not letting our customers create custom roles that are not going to actually work for them, especially in the web UI. I think in general with the API, permissions are much more straightforward. It's like, can you do a get request to this endpoint? Can you do a post request to this endpoint? If we were only managing an API, I think this would all be a lot more straightforward. But in the UI, because you're clicking to different pages to get to different sub pages, there's a risk of allowing infinite flexibility might create a bad UX.
And I have another follow-up question. Is it gonna be possible to associate it with a name? Yeah, I know it's a silly thing, but a company may associate this type of roles and permission with the name of auditor or whatever.
Yes, I have seen, we don't have that now, but I've seen that in an issue somewhere that we want to add both a name and a description field to the member roles table so that companies can kind of write information about what that custom role does and what it's for. So yes.
I'm actually surprised we don't already have names for custom roles. I thought we have.
We did it. It's an MVC, it's just super bare bones.
We gave it a hard-coded name, right?
Yes. If somebody creates a custom role right now, because it's only read code, which anybody above guest would have anyway, it just says guest-custom in the UI, if they have that. Okay, so the future of custom roles, or do we want to already move on? More questions on this topic? We'll also do questions at the end as well. This future section should be pretty quick. So we released the MVC in 15.9, celebrated for like 3 minutes. Thought, yay, we did it. And then it's like, okay, what's next? And what I feel like this has been for me a really like eye-opening experience, or a very like seeing the world in a different way, because the past few milestones, I feel like I've been really heads down, making sure that this first MVC could launch and be usable. And then we got there. And then, you know that meme about like draw the circles for the owl? It's like you draw how to draw an owl, you draw a circle, you draw another circle. And then the step 3 is like, and then draw the rest of the owl. It's like, just do it. So it's like, we drew our circles, that's our MVC. And then it's like, and now customize everything. right? Just customize everything. And a big part of this, like Emma already said, is going to be consolidating our existing permissions. If you listen to the iteration office hours where Hannah talked about custom roles, or if you just look in our docs, you'll notice that our permissions table in our docs has dozens of rows. I haven't taken the time to actually count it, but it's like you're scrolling on that page. You're scrolling, you're scrolling, you're scrolling. There's been an effort going back a while to consolidate those permissions, and that was very much focused on, okay, like what in the docs can be smushed together just so that it's like easier for customers to understand how our permissions work today. This isn't even exactly related to custom roles. So that's an effort, and we actually have an issue for this milestone that I've been working on for consolidating 2 of those, just to see, can we consolidate these? I started working on that and quickly realized that there is no one-to-one mapping of a permission in our docs to an ability in the code, right? So a declarative policy is our permissions library, and ability is kind of a thing you can do. And it goes both ways in terms of, how do I put this? Like one row in our permissions doc might say, can a user create a merge request, for example? You'd think that would maybe map to one permission in our code base. There might be 5 permissions that are checked, or 5 abilities that are checked in order to create a merge request. Or there might be one and it's also used for like 5 other things. And so I feel like this process of turning our permission system from being a backend implementation detail to a public API is going to require some real thinking, right? Because suddenly it was the case with static roles that if somebody wants to refactor how permissions work, as long as they end up belonging to the same static roles at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because it's just backend code. But our MVC and our plan going forward is going to turn our permission system, our existing permission system, into really a public API as we make each of these permissions customizable. So this is going to be an effort that involves every engineering team at GitLab. It's going to be a future where we can't, like, we don't want to say nobody can make changes to policy files, but how do we make it safe to make changes to policy files? How do we ensure that if I'm going in and just doing a refactor in a policy file, I'm not breaking custom roles, I'm not changing the behavior of custom roles in a way that would be unexpected, like giving a custom user more permissions than maybe the admin intended or the group owner intended when they created that custom role. And then just like in general, from talking to different engineers, I've learned that permissions refactors have always been really challenging at GitLab. Like our permission system is difficult to understand in a very concise way, both because there are so many permissions and because we do permissions checks at the view level, at the controller level, sometimes at the model and service level. And so figuring out, okay, for this one web request, which permissions are checked and what do those permissions like do exactly is like a multi-part problem. So that's kind of the next big hurdle. We're trying to make progress on also adding more customizable permissions, like, or it's like a simultaneous, like make a little bit of progress on the project, like add another customizable permission, but at the same time, like be thinking further down the road and kind of make sure that we're designing a system that's going to be scalable, because with 700, there are over 700 abilities in our policy files. If we just went through and made each of those customizable one by one, we're going to be building this feature forever. And we don't want that. We want this feature to be complete someday. And I think we will get there. We just need to be strategic. So I've been writing down all these thoughts in a document. I'll share that with everyone. And we'll collaborate on that and just make sure we have a good plan going forward. So that's all. Now we can get to questions. Gosha, you added some ahead of time. Do you want to voice yours? I added one just to seed it, but we don't have to do mine first. We'll do yours first.
First of all, I think you should celebrate for more than 3 minutes because this is a great accomplishment. So kudos to you for doing that. And yeah, my first question is, are you going to prepare a guidance for teams regarding adding new abilities, permissions? So for example, is it going to be a new standard that if you adding a new ability, it needs to go to custom roles as well? Or is it going to be like depending on the team's I don't know, thinking? Because I can see that, you know, having too many granular permissions to the custom roles can also be confusing for users, especially when we add the UI section to configure them.
I mean, so it looks like Hannah is responding, but I would say at least like my response to that is like, that's definitely something that we're thinking a lot about in terms of the future of custom permissions. Today, it's very difficult to determine who owns a permission. So when you say, when a team adds a permission, it's like, we don't really track that in any way. And then if we want to if I want to refactor a permission, it's a manual process of like diving through Git history to figure out which team might know about this permission and like own it. So I think we need to encode some version of ownership. Imra suggested something similar to what we do for database tables today. And what was the other thing? Oh, in terms of the changes, yes. Like I think I was just in the back end pairing session last week, I was asking folks about like, is there a Rubocop rule we could add that basically doesn't allow anybody to add a new policy, like a new ability to our policy? Like, can we just like stop everything and make people, because we want to consolidate. And so we want to make sure that as we're consolidating permissions, people aren't just like throwing new permissions in on the side, like that we're actually creating a cohesive system. So I think we will need to introduce some kind of automated check, not necessarily to say you can't add any more abilities, but it needs to be like named in a certain way. Yeah, considered in a certain way.
Thanks. My second question was actually the same thing that Eduardo was just asking. So I think we can totally skip it because it's the same thing. I was asking about destructive permissions, but we already discussed that. So thank you.
Then I'm going to read Rohit's question. He's not on the call. Great work on custom roles, and thanks a lot for providing a detailed context on the topic. Much appreciated. I do a question though. As a part of the work on custom roles, are there any plans on providing a capability like AWS IAM policy simulator, which lets a user see the permission applied to a principal in a given context? A feature like this would be extremely helpful to our customers and ourselves to figure out what permissions apply to a user project group in a given context, especially if a custom role is assigned to them. So I wasn't aware of the policy simulator, but this is something I talked about previously, that when about editing a custom roles. So when an admin edits a custom roles, it's very hard to like foresee the changes they have. But I think this IAM policy simulator would be a great help for that. There's no existing issue to integrate to it, but I think it's definitely something that we should and want to consider in the future. Also, even if we just consider our current permissions, even without customizable roles, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding because of the complexity on how it works, and also there's bugs in the API that sometimes the members API returns the wrong access level, and I think there's this policy simulator would help both systems to understand what's going on, or what an edit will change in the hierarchy.
I'll add this too, but I have a sort of generic issue, which we haven't filled out much detail yet in, that's kind of says, you need to be able to see what role your users have and what constitutes that role. And then especially if we start throwing in inheritance and group sharing, it becomes complicated quickly to see that information. So I'd say at this point, we have a placeholder for this concept, but we haven't decided yet how to implement it.
Could impersonate that user be an option to see what it can do if an admin is unclear about, oh, is this feature available to this role if I give these other things? Maybe they can create that user, but I don't know if that is practical. Probably it's better another approach, but
Not unless you build impersonation for SaaS.
Would you say, Cynthia?
Not unless you build the ability to impersonate a user in SaaS, because it's only available to admins right now, and so only available to self-managed at the moment.
I think we also want to like make it more scalable in terms of like seeing like not just a single user, so impersonating a single user, but like, as I mentioned, like maybe there's 1,000 users that has this custom roles assigned. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, I agree.
I will read the next question as well from Rohit. Does the custom roles work also include adding support for fine-grained scopes to our API? GitHub has already been supporting fine-grained scopes for a few years now, and they took it a step further last year by introducing support for fine-grained personal access token. So I think this is a bit different than the customizable roles. But I actually haven't looked into the open issue yet. I kind of like think the scopes we currently have can be assigned to access tokens. Maybe a way to integrate the two is to assign a customizable role to the. For example, there's a bot user behind the project or group access token, and we can define a customizable role. Excuse me, for the membership of that bot user.
Yeah, I would break down our custom role work aside from token unification and scope unification for that matter. So yeah, that's a separate work stream.
And so just to make sure we're going to end on time, which is in 1 minute. Maybe we could just async answer this last question. Sorry, Chris.
No worries. Just want to say thanks for all the work you all did on the MPC, and I think that's really exciting. But yeah, I think that one could be answered async for sure. Thanks.
Cool. Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining our first Lunch and Learn, at least of 2023. And let us know, like, if you have any feedback on this kind of format or further questions or whatever. It's a learning experience for everyone. So appreciate that.
Thanks so much for organizing that.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.